Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. 9:42 a.m. and we are now going to be talking with Nobuntu Hlaso Webster. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We're looking into a very concerning issue that they have raised. Build One South Africa is obviously the organization that Nobuntu is with. She is the deputy leader, and we are looking at the issue around unemployed teachers. They're protesting for jobs. Why do we find ourselves in a situation like this? What about the Department of Education? What's happened to the budgets that has been set aside for X number of teachers? Because we know the situation in our schools are absolutely ridiculous. You have up to 60 learners per class per teacher. Totally unacceptable. Nobuntu, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. Lovely to have you on the show.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having us on your show this morning.
How did this issue reach you guys? Who raised the red flag? I think if anybody talks about the ratio of learners to teachers in schools, we are quite aware of that, and it is a very, very worrying situation. But not for a minute did I imagine that we have scores of unemployed teachers walking the streets.
So, the Unemployed Educators Movement of South Africa reached out to us to let us know of their plight. They had found themselves in a situation where they had been approaching the Department of Basic Education, but they were not happy with the responses that they were getting. They were not satisfied with the progress and the engagements with the Department of Basic Education. They came to us, and we were actually really shocked when they gave us the numbers. So, I mean, what they told us in the database they have is that there are over 20,000 qualified unemployed teachers just in Gauteng alone. And they showed us the database, and we were able to view it and to verify this information. And I mean, that was something that was shocking. But we also found that there were other unemployed educators in other provinces. We've engaged with some of them from KZN, from the Free State, from Eastern Cape, from Northwest. And they really are teachers, educators who are sitting with the plight of being unemployed. They also, though, have shared with us and have outlined a number of other issues in the education system, which they observed while they were still in the system, many of them of which have been in the system and have been teachers. But we really do find ourselves with a very concerning and worrying situation in our schools, in our education system. And, one of the biggest issues is finding ourselves with close to 30,000 teachers who are unemployed sitting at home when there are 24,000. I mean, back in February, the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, stated that there were 24,000 vacant teacher posts in South Africa. And so, it's concerning that you could have teachers that are unemployed, classrooms that are overcrowded with up to 70 learners to one teacher, and then find yourselves with 24,000 vacancies that exist that haven't been filled.
So, how does she justify the fact that those vacancies haven't been filled? Have you, as the deputy leader of Build One South Africa, approached her and shown her, or her deputy or her spokesperson, the facts and figures to hand? Because clearly you guys must have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb to check that everything is verifiable and it is in fact the true picture that you are going to submit to the Department of Education.
So the Unemployed Educators Movement started engaging with the department back in October of this year. They have sat in meetings with the department. They have constantly asked to meet with the minister or with somebody who's a representative from her office, or from the department. And they've met with administrators from the department, and they have just not been satisfied with the response they've been given. They've been asked to submit their ID numbers, so that their details are sent to the provinces, who the department says are the ones who hire. The schools are the ones who hire, the provinces are the ones who hire. They've done that, they've submitted that, but they have not been adequate responses with regards to why do we find ourselves in this position anyway. where there are 20,000 vacant teacher posts. We then sent a memorandum together in partnership with UEMSA to the department to ask for Angie Muteke to come and receive a memorandum for us on Monday. There was nobody from her office there. It was still the same administrators that UEMSA has been engaging with for the past 2 months, and unsatisfied with the response and with the action that has come from there. So we have unfortunately at this point not come to a point where we are able to sit with anybody from Angie Muteka's office, despite repeated requests for that to be the case.
So, Nobuntu, obviously, you're going to be given a whole host of different scenarios for the reason why are they perhaps, have they reached their pensionable years? Were they perhaps, in the eyes of the department, troublemakers, whistleblowers maybe? What is the situation? Not adequately qualified, perhaps didn't fulfill their obligations as teachers as mandated. So they could throw a whole lot of such issues back at you and those unemployed teachers and say, this is the reason why you find yourself in an unemployable situation. How are you going to deal with those issues?
So these unemployed educators have documents as to why they are outside of the system. So their processes have been documented. Many of the unemployed educators we've met with were taken out of the system during COVID and were
Ah,
unfortunately never absorbed back into the system. Some of them are graduates who have been assistants, educators' assistants for a long time from school to school, often not even paid or not paid on time. Many of these educators have, over the course of this year, filled in as substitute teachers. So they are not people who are unemployable. So they filled in as substitute teachers, it's short term, and actually they complain that they either don't get paid or get paid very late, even when they are substitute teachers. So we do have documentation and evidence of how they find themselves outside of the employment system and the education system, and we have engaged with them to find out what the reasons are. So from their side, of the educators we have engaged with, they have legitimate reasons as to why they are at home, and it is actually reasons that are legitimate from their perspective, because they haven't done nothing wrong, but not legitimate from the education department's perspective. I mean, when you go and look more into this issue, you find that many schools have continued with that rotational system of learners, and I've been to some of the schools, especially in KZN personally, where the rotational system of learners attending 2 to 3 days a week has continued. So there is
ooh,
no, yeah. So you find yourselves with that situation in many schools, which is why many of these educators are not back in schools, because there are teachers that are teaching grade 1 and teaching grade 2 as well, because the learners are still to this day taking turns and are on that rotational system.
that's very worrying because obviously it indicates that those learners are being compromised. How can you just have 2 or 3 days of teaching and then still expect to come out of the school year at the end of the year with a reasonable pass rate? You're not even going to be adequately prepared to go into your next class, your higher class? How are they going to absolutely justify that these kids are okay and ready to pass into a higher standard? Totally unacceptable. And I'm kind of wondering, what sort of pressure are you going to bear on the Department of Education? And are you also going to insist that this gets rectified and gets rectified now during the holidays, that at the start of the new school year, teachers are employed? The numbers of learners are lessened in each classroom so that meaningful engagement can happen between learner and teacher.
So, I mean, some of the issues which we've raised with the department is, first of all, the teachers' intake process. Because what we've discovered is that the teachers' intake process is in many instances marred by corruption. And so,
Oh,
if you're not willing to give salary kickbacks, if you're not willing to exchange favors for a position. There's many educators who are unemployed because they haven't been willing to do that. The second issue you've raised is the one you and I have spoken about now, which is the ratio of qualified educators to students in the country. Part of the reason why there is this issue is because there's the presidential program which has taken on a number of unemployed graduates. But what has happened with that is that those unemployed graduates are not necessarily qualified as teachers. So they've been taken on in this program, they've been put into schools, and this is what has also left then the qualified educators outside of the system. So there's been quite a bit of abuse of that program, and that is what has managed to have bodies in the classrooms that are teaching children, but it's not necessarily qualified educators that are on that youth employment program or youth employment initiative. So that's an issue that we've raised with the department. We've raised the issue of subject allocation to unqualified teachers. So in order to make use of the teachers that are in the system, there are many instances where there's teachers who are unqualified for subjects that are being asked or put on subjects that they're not qualified for. So these are the issues that we've raised. And what we've asked the department, what we've called on the department to do, is to conduct a third-party audit on all these issues. So we want to make sure that there's an audit on these issues. These issues are verified. There's a report that states, for instance, the number of unemployed educators, that states the intake process, and that has audited the intake process, and that, for instance, audits the allocation of subjects for the educators that are in the system, and to then provide a plan of action for the 24,000 vacant teacher posts in schools across the country. That is what we've called on the department to do. We await a response to the memorandum which we submitted, and we will take it from there, engaging them. But we're not going to leave this issue. We're not going to let it rest, because it is a fundamental issue which then contributes to the dropout rate, for instance, that we find in schools. It contributes to school leavers who are inadequately prepared for tertiary education, who are inadequately prepared for the working world. So this is something that we're not going to leave. This is something that we're going to continue to engage and to push as Build One South Africa.
You've given them a deadline.
We've given them a deadline. We've asked for a response within the next 6 days. So we submitted this yesterday, and we will be expecting a response by the beginning of next week.
Okay, let's leave it there. And we do hope you're going to give us a heads up on the response from the Department of Education. This is a very serious matter. It has to do with our children, our children's future, and of course, the future leaders of our country. Nobuntu Hlazo Webster, thank you indeed for being with us. You are the Deputy Leader of Build One South Africa, and I'm very pleased to see the type of fights you guys are taking up to make our country, in a position where let's make it great. It has so much of potential. Let's not neglect our future leaders of the country. So thank you indeed. We will talk again with you very soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is exactly 9:55, our final interview for the morning, and that is with Roshan Dadu. She is a long-standing activist and member of the South African BDS Coalition. Please stay with us. We're going to take a short break, and then we will talk with Roshan Dadu.